I came to this strange world hoping I could learn.
So our second panel is a group of industry leaders. We've got several people from a variety of backgrounds, and on the far end is Charity Gerbrandt, who is the principal creative lead at Disney Interactive. And Charity's been with Disney since, well, with Club Penguin, since 2006, and she started as the online community manager. And then next to Charity, we have Anne-Marie Kirby. And Anne-Marie is the CEO of CoreHealth Technologies, and she's been running that company, a more established tech entrepreneur. She's been running it for about 10 years, and prior to that, she spent 4 years with eOptimize and another 5 years at Total Care as a programmer. Beside Anne-Marie, we've got Tracy Medve. Tracy is the president of Kelowna Flightcraft, and she's been there just since May, is that right? Since May. But she's had senior management roles in airlines since 1985, including most recently Canada North and CT Aero projects. And Tracy's a lawyer and has an MBA and is the head of the largest private employer in the Okanagan with 988 employees, 188 of which are women. And beside Tracy is Barb Marcolin, who is an assistant professor of information systems at UBC Okanagan. She's been there since 2012. And she's spent 17 years teaching and 7 years doing IT research in high-tech firms. So we have a very experienced and accomplished panel. And I'd just like to start from this end going that way and get your 2 minutes as to how you ended up in the tech sector and what led you here and what your background is.
I was thinking about that, and what I realized is I discovered technology as I went along. I was doing something else, and all of a sudden I kept stumbling over the technology. And so I started to go to college to be an accountant, and someone told me that computing was going to be important to that field, so I would take a program. And a year later, I discovered I loved that better than something else. So, and it seemed to be like that throughout my life. I, went to a computing science program, discovered that I wanted to talk to people, and as the mathematicians were writing their formulas on the board, I thought, I've seen 4 other classes like this. When are we going to talk to the people? And that's when I realized that I wanted to go out and find business and technology. So I have a PhD in business and information systems, which is how to put the glue between the technology and the business. And I'm also head of the undergraduate program, trying to rethink how we teach people in these spaces and try and build and engage with the community in that. But I'm also starting a company myself. In my spare time. Because for the last 10 years, I've been trying to help the tech industry understand how to apply technology around research in health. And they just don't get it, right? And you show it and you go, this is the way it works, and they build something else. It's like, okay, that doesn't work. This is what we want. And so a doctor in Ontario and I are starting a company and doing that. So it's just this discovery and as you go along. So that's my story.
Emergent tech.
Yes.
So I started my career as a lawyer. It was a very short-lived career. I had a nightmare one day. It turned out I was really awake while I was having this nightmare. I found myself, I was a lawyer, and I was working for the provincial government, and I was living in Regina. Oh. Sorry, Janice. And out of desperation to get out of all of those things that were going on in my life, I phoned a guy who I knew ran a little air service in Saskatoon. It was called Norcan Air. That was in 1985, and I begged a job because I wanted to go back to Saskatoon where I had attended university. And he, in a moment of weakness, gave me the job, said, yes, you can come. And I'm sure he forgot he'd hired me by the time I moved back there, but I wasn't leaving and decided I really wanted to give it a shot. So I stayed and did some really interesting things in my first year in that role. And was totally hooked on the industry. It's a fascinating, very interesting industry with lots of facets and lots of things you can do. my company, that company was bought out in 1987 by Time Air. Some of you might remember that company. I went on to go there and do all kinds of jobs. I never actually ever really practiced real law again. I just hire lawyers. I think they're ever so much better at it than I was ever going to be. Eventually went on and started an aviation management consulting company with a good friend of mine, not a girl, but his name is Carmen. And we did that for 15 years, and then I had the opportunity to apply for the job as the president of Canadian North. We had been doing consulting services for Canadian North for many years. It was a great opportunity to do what I'd really always wanted to do, which was run an airline, and had that chance for 5 years. I took that job in 2007, and then had a chance in May of this year to come to Kelowna Flightcraft, and it's been really excellent. So that's my story.
I grew up in a small town in northern BC, and when I graduated from high school, I did what every woman did, and I took business administration, mostly online because that's all that was available, and the college would bring in one instructor a semester, so you took whatever course came in, and it happened to be a computer course, an introduction to computers one semester and programming the second, and I was in a class with 15 or so other people, and they were all professional foresters. They were all men, of course, and me. And I took this computer course, and I just so loved it. I really got it. It was just so easy. I'm a very logical thinker, and I was looking at these foresters that were all puzzled, and how do I do this formula? And I don't even know what the formula is, but I could code it so easy. So I gave up the plan on business administration, and I left where I lived and moved to Prince George and took one of the first diploma programs in computer information systems. And I came out of there as a programmer, went to Vancouver to start my career because there weren't many choices in healthcare. And I sat down at my desk and they said, okay, first you're going to change these reports and do this and this. And I looked at it and I thought, my God, I didn't take programming. I don't know what I took because this is nothing like I've seen before. But anyways, I stuck it out, and I've spent many years, obviously, doing different computer roles. From in that particular place, that healthcare place, I ended up being the technical programmer in the first year. I've been a project lead, a software architect, numerous different roles, but always technical. But it was in healthcare for 20 years, over 4 different companies. And I finally got sick of things like talking about the different procedures in radiology, the way you bill the government for procedures, just the whole sick care industry. And I took a passion with prevention. So I've started my company 10 years ago, and we have been building employee wellness solutions for the last 10 years. And I'm flattered to be called a successful tech company, because I think this is the first time I've heard that, you know, being a graduated tech company instead of a startup. So.
That's cool. Well, I'm Charity, and tech. Oh, let's see. I definitely see tech as a tool for doing the things that you want to do. I didn't get into technology because I love technology. I got to technology because I like storytelling and I love working with teams. So all throughout high school, I was kind of one of those people that just does everything, and not really the best person at anything, but you can kind of do a little bit of everything. So upon graduation, I had a lot of opportunities to do whatever it was that I wanted to do. A lot of encouragement from instructors and family and all that. You should go into law. You should go into being a doctor. You should do all these things. So I went to theater school because that's what really excited me, was storytelling, making an impact on people's lives, connecting with people emotionally, and working together with a team. I was always part of team sports and things like that, so that really excited me. So I didn't actually end up finishing theater school because it can be a very, excuse the pun, but a dramatic place, and it was very dramatic. So I thought, you know, what else do I love? I love theater, I love music, I love sports, I love teams. So I went off and I did I went to business school and did recreation management and special events management as my major. And then I came back to Kelowna. So I lived most of my life in Kelowna since I was 7, so I can say it's home. Came back to Kelowna and actually started working in healthcare as an activity aide in care homes, so working with elderly people, specifically with dementia, doing activation programs, arts programs, fitness programs, all of that. And that was really, really fun, very, very interesting. But there was definitely a ceiling to that, and it was about that time that Club Penguin had just started up in Kelowna, and it was in its startup, friends hiring friends. We don't really know what we need, but we know we're moving fast and we're going fast, so we need people that we can trust and people that we like. So I got a call from some friends who were part of the startup, and they said, hey, we need someone who's good with kids and likes activities and all this fun stuff. And I was like, okay, I'll come in for an interview. I didn't know what Club Penguin was. I thought I was doing a special events job. I kind of BS'd my way through the interview, and that's how I ended up in technology. And as the company grew, I grew with it, and I love it because you keep on learning. Always, always learning, trying, failing. And when you're with good people and you're making a product that is making a good impact on people's lives, it's totally worth it.
So this is a really interesting panel of leaders in the tech sector because they've come from a real variety of backgrounds, and all their paths have led to being a leader in the tech sector in the Okanagan. So that's a very positive concept. The fact that it doesn't matter what your background is, you can still get into the sector. And I guess there's a lot of different directions we could go here, but I guess the fact is, in Canada, the fields of science, technology, engineering, math, they represent all these technical related fields, or they represent higher paying jobs and higher economic activity, more exports and so on. So it's really important for us to encourage women to get into all the kinds of businesses that you're involved with, and to study these fields. But only 6% of leaders in the tech sector are women. So I guess I'd like to just focus on those trends and in the questions tonight with you folks. And I guess, Charity, as a non-tech person in a tech company, I'll start with you and just ask, what opportunities or challenges have you faced as a non-tech woman in a tech company?
Well, let's see. That's a great question. I think one of the first things that I had to learn early on was to admit that I don't know, and to be very, very vulnerable about that, and to empower and trust the people around me who do have the answers. One of the best pieces of advice that I ever got from a tech director, when I would come to the table and I'd just be like, I don't know if I'm asking people for their estimates, or I'm asking if something is possible, and they could be completely lying to me. I don't understand what it is they're working in, or and he had advised.
Is this an opportunity or a challenge?
It was a challenge because I didn't know.
It's also an opportunity.
It's completely an opportunity, and the best advice I got there was, just ask questions. Ask more questions. Why this? Why that? Why that? If they can't, and he was saying this about his engineering team, if they can't draw you a layman's term diagram of it that you're going to understand, they probably don't know what they're talking about either, right? And I just thought, you know what, that's so true. So I go into situations a lot open with what I'm good at and understanding where I need to learn, and really asking people to help me understand. And curiosity never dies. Ask questions every day. That's one challenge. I can go on.
Did you have any other opportunities that you want to focus on?
Let's see. I think that one of the big opportunities, and this is not gender biased, but within technology companies, is communication. There are certain people that do not want to be that line of communication, as we heard in the other panel, between business and technology, or people who just want to be hands down or heads down in the work that they are really good at, whether it is in code or in art or in design or whatever that is. But you need that bridge between what does the business need? What does the customer need? What does the audience want? And how are we going to get there? And how are you going to lead that team of people who are your experts? And you need them to be heads down doing their job and doing a really good job. But you also need to be providing a direction. And being that communication between business and art or business and development it takes a specific type of communication and a specific type of person that is also a challenge and opportunity.
Mm-hmm. So Anne-Marie, you talked about how you'd been a programmer and you'd been dealing on the sick side of the equation, and then you wanted to get on the wellness side. But why did you start a tech company to do it? Why did you choose entrepreneurship as a way of going there?
I chose to do it as a tech company because that's really all I knew.
But you could have become a programmer for a wellness-related business.
Yeah, I could. It was more a fact of I had a vision and I had an interest in employee wellness way back when, probably 13 years ago, and I thought it was a really evolving market, and I didn't see anybody getting into it, and I knew what needed to be done, and I was going to do it.
So that's a great market-driven entrepreneurial story again, which is fantastic. I love hearing those. So, Barb, I've got a question for you, which has more to do with UBCO and just the, do you know some of the background information around enrollment and what are the trends or the facts around women right now? I know that 60% of university students right now are female. How does that track in the sciences and engineering?
Well, I had to go and find out. And it turns out that the campus, UBCO campus, is 56% women right now. And our faculty of business is only 42%. So what that says is we have this large campus and a high percentage and a majority of women, but most of them don't end up in our faculty. So that might be one of the barriers. Why aren't they getting into some of those positions and jobs? And I looked around and I thought, well, who are the role models in the faculty? And it turns out that 7 out of 18 of our full-time faculty are women. So only about 38% are women. So
this is in the business faculty.
In the business faculty. And in the sciences, the numbers, I believe, are even lower. So it's dropping and trending. So it's really an issue of why are females not going into some of these areas. And I went around and started to ask people, and some of them said, we just didn't realize. I think it was to what Jeff was speaking to at the beginning, is just not knowing of those opportunities. And so when I mentioned some of these to some of the young females, they went, I can do that? And so I think that's one of the issues. And one of the issues, certainly we have a campus we can take advantage of and create some of that awareness.
Well, certainly, in terms of economic development, having a university with an engineering faculty and science faculty and medical school is one of the most important underpinnings of a thriving tech sector. So, what we need to do is create more linkages. And so what we've heard from Charity is the fact that, there's an opportunity there to create those linkages between the techies and business. And I think women are well placed to do that because of some of our attributes. So I think that from an economic development strategy, it'd probably be really useful to try and harness that. And I know UBCO is doing some things. I know that my daughter, when she was, I think it was middle school already, there was a women in science and engineering event up at the university that she was invited to. And I do know that Deborah Buzzard is very interested in supporting more women. So I think UBCO is on the right track, and I think there's lots more that could be done. So we look forward to that. So Tracy, you mentioned during the break, you weren't sure you agreed with that whole concept of needing a woman mentor, and I tend to agree with you. In my career in big companies, I had no women mentors because there were no women. there weren't even women's washrooms, much less women. So definitely I had male mentors, but more than that, I had male sponsors. You know, I had men who, you know, my interview when I joined Alcatel was the following. I'd done a consulting project for them through the business school where I did my MBA. And the head of strategic planning wanted me to work for them. And I met him for coffee, and I said, why do you want me to work for you? I'm not an engineer. This was a company based in France. I'm not French, and I'm a woman. And he said, I want you to work for us in charge of strategic planning for this $20 billion dollar company because you're not an engineer, you're not French, and you're a woman. And it was an extremely positive experience for me. I had access at all levels of the organization because I didn't fit in any of the boxes. I was a total anomaly, and I got to go from the bottom ranks to the top ranks and be able to work effectively. So what's been your experience in your career around mentorship and sponsorship?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting distinction. I had the same problem. There really were no women in senior management roles in most airlines. I think I'm probably the only woman running an airline, commercial airline, in not just in Canada, but I think almost in North America. So there's a bit of a paucity of women to talk to. But there's a lot of men out there that love the business and were happy to see someone who was enthusiastic about it and willing to learn and, you know, put my hand up for whatever. So that's just how that all went along. And I think it's also, I get a chance to talk to, you know, a lot of young women starting careers in aviation or just thinking about what they want to do. And one of the things that I think is important to remember is, you know, if you don't make a big deal about being a woman, doing whatever it is you're trying to do, neither will anyone else. Honestly, you just figure out what it is that gives you a kick every day, that is interesting to you. You just go after it, and you surround yourself with people who know about it. Don't be scared to ask questions. I know nothing about how to. We're about to cut a hole in the side of an airplane in our farm. I have no idea how to do that. The guys and gals who are on the floor there know how to do it, but I know a bunch of other stuff that can be helpful there. And I think you just have to look for people that you have the same mindset as, that know more than you do, and ask lots of questions. And it doesn't matter if you're a girl or whatever. You know, that's not the important thing.
So. I guess you've been Anne-Marie, you've been in the business of running a business, starting a business, and then running it for long enough to know, and I don't know if you have kids or not.
Yeah, I do too.
Would you, if they came to you and said, Mommy, I'm sure they call you Mommy still, what should I do with my life? Should I be like you and start a business? What would you say? Would you say go get a work experience at a big company first and then start a business, or would you flat out say forget it? What would you say?
No, my son, he's 19, so the mommy thing. I was laughing at that. He's taking engineering at UBCO, and he is an entrepreneur through and through. Like, you could almost say it skipped a generation with me because he's got it all. He does look at me as a role model, and I am all for him doing that, but I'm not telling him he needs the experience. I'm telling him he needs the piece of paper that says he knows what he's doing. So he wants to start now, and I said, well, good luck with that, finding investors, because I'm not going to be one of them until you know what you're doing. So he's determined to get the engineering degree, because that will then tell the world he knows what he's doing, and hopefully he can raise money.
Now, if you had a daughter, do you think it would be different?
I do have a daughter, and she's 16.
Does she call you Mommy?
Yeah, she does. When she wants something. She is not an entrepreneur. She is a deep thinker, a carer. I think she's going to be in healthcare herself. She doesn't show any symptoms of having ideas and, wow, what if we did this, and I should do that, and do you know if that went like this? But she's if she asked me, I would say the same thing. You need that piece of paper so people will believe you. I don't know if it's the experience. Actually, if it was the experience, I would not be a CEO because I'm a coder.
So, Sheryl Sandberg, in that book, Lean In, she talks about a few things. And I heard her speak once at the APEC Summit in San Francisco when the U.S. hosted the APEC Summit in 2011. And she was talking about the ambition gap with women and how that's really the thing that we need to address and, give ourselves permission to have the big ambitions. And one of the things she talked about was in her book was taking career risks and stretch assignments. And they say that men are hired for their potential and women are hired on the basis of their qualifications, which makes a big difference. Tracy, I'll ask you, and maybe Barb as well. What are your thoughts about that? Have you ever done that and taken a stretch assignment? I suspect yes. Tell us about that.
They were all stretch assignments, and I think that's also really key. I guess you could go into a career and really think about how you want to lay out your path and so on. I didn't come at it from that perspective, but I think you just got to stick your hand up and volunteer for all kinds of things you don't know anything about necessarily, and go in there and admit it up front, but be enthusiastic, because then there'll always be somebody who'll go, yeah, you can play here, you can play in this room. And when you get your foot in the door, you just kick it open, and what you don't know, you ask about, and eventually you'll know about that thing. And the next time you do it, you're more confident to put your hand up again, and people will recognize that. And that's how you get experience, is doing stuff that you don't know anything about necessarily.
I think that ambition gap is really interesting, because I did competence work, which is how skilled people are in technology to do their jobs. And I asked the men and the women how confident they were, and the men came out at 75%, and the women were 46%. And then I gave them a test. They were all 55%. So the men were a little overconfident, and the women were underconfident. So, I mean,
they were equally competent.
They were equally competent. There was no difference in what their actual skills were. And I was surprised by that, because I actually thought that maybe the men had more skills, because they were almost convincing me. And then I helped companies to realize that you had to help them to be realistic about their skills and develop their skills, and there was a way to do that, but also to help the women recognize that they had skills. And that meant that they could step up and take those stretch assignments, that they were just as skilled, and don't step back. Just put that hand up and be there. And I say that to my young students. You're just as skilled as everybody else. You got the same marks as everybody else on that assignment. Why don't you have your hand up at the front of that class? And they go, oh yeah, I can do that. So yes, that's really important.
So another one of the things that she talks about in her book is that she was told that in order to be a success in her job, she had to stop people-pleasing. And she characterizes that as a female thing. And I know it's not only female. I know that all characteristics are, on a continuum, and we all have both male and female characteristics. But so what is your thought about people-pleasing, and whether that is something that we need to, as women, get over or do something about? What do you think, Charity?
I think that I come from a very calm and somewhat conflict-adverse family. So people-pleasing is definitely part of my background. And the thought of people not liking me makes me super uncomfortable. However, I think that there is definitely, when you are in a job and you're in a role and you're a business, there's a couple things. You have to hit the goals and have to understand the goals of what you're trying to do. There has to be a vision that everybody knows you're following. So that clear communication, if you can get your team on the same page, then what you're tackling, if you're not going to please people or people disagree with the vision, it's fine. You're attacking the vision. Or if people don't like the product direction, you're attacking the product direction. I think there is a way to maintain respect and maintain a good sense of team and maintain, high morale in your team, because your team likes each other and they know that they respect and value, and that's flip side. I think that's super important. If that's people pleasing, I'm guilty of it, because I think it's really important for a culture of a studio. But I do think that you're going to have to make decisions that are not going to please everybody, but the responsibility of the leader is to explain why. And if people fundamentally disagree with why, that's a totally separate issue than making it an interpersonal issue. There will be interpersonal issues. I'm not saying there aren't, but I think that there are certain things that you should be focusing your team on so that you're all rallying around the same goal to lessen that me versus you, us versus them type of communication.
Yeah, so it sounds pretty clear that you've gotten over the
It's
you're
still, you know
self-aware.
what? I still have to psych myself up if I know I'm going to have a hard conversation. The other day I had it in my office. I was walking around with my cell phone. Maybe I'll just text it. I'm like, I'm not going to text it. I'm going to face it because I know it's a hard conversation and I know I still need to work on this. But, you know, it's being honest. It's not apologizing for it. It's coming from a factual standpoint. And for me, as a woman, I'm not ashamed that I'm a woman or that I am emotional. So I will come at it from an emotional standpoint. This is how I feel about it. These are the facts. This is what I'm seeing. I want to know what you're feeling and what you're seeing, and I want to solve this. And sometimes that turns out really well, and sometimes it's still difficult. But it has to be done because that's your job.
So Tracy, before we hit the audience with their questions, you've got 188 women working for you. Do you see there being any sort of aspects that they might possess sort of collectively that might hold them back, or things that they could do to enhance their promotability?
I would say no more than anybody else in a job. You know, there's technical jobs that will require certain technical backgrounds and credentials just because it's by regulation. You know, in the piloting world, or as an aircraft maintenance engineer, for example, there's very specific skills and credentials you have to have. Beyond that, I don't think it's any different for the women that work in that company than for the guys that are in similar roles or doing whatever job they have. You know, you work hard, you do your best every day, you try and make sure that you get better all the time, and I think anybody can do anything then, whether quite frankly whether you're a male or a female. And
so we know there's going to be labor shortages for skilled workers in the future. Do you have any advice for young women who want to pursue a path that's going to give them success? Do you have any opportunities in your firm that you particularly show promise?
We have a fairly steady recruitment process going on, although the turnover in the company is particularly low. The company is also growing, so there's opportunities all the time that come up. And you know, even if you come in at some level that you don't know anything about the airline business as such, you don't know what you can find out once you stick your nose in the tent. You know what you're going to find when you're there, and there's lots of opportunity. You know, we're a company that promotes promotions from within, I guess is the way to say it. And, you know, we like to promote people internally first before bringing in new people. So that there's great opportunities in that company. There's great opportunities to do all kinds of things, not just techie jobs that I would call like piloting and engineering are more technical, but you know, we have a enterprise resource system, so there's all of that. Accounting, there's all kinds of support jobs, technical records jobs, all kinds of things that are really interesting jobs, good careers, and you can move around the world. If you don't know how to do anything in our company, you can go anywhere in the world with those skills. Are completely transportable.
So Fiona is standing up and ready to take your questions. So I have
Hi, my name's Leslie. I'm just
where are you
curious.
from, Leslie?
I work with Swagman Rocks. It's down in Penticton, a 23-year history. I wanted to know what your experience is and what you observe to the benefits of having gender diversity in the workplace.
Well, I don't know that there's any particular advantage to it. That's maybe not the right way to answer that question. I think that women are really good at doing some things. Like we talked about somebody mentioned multitasking. Women are really good at that. And so maybe they're, you know, when you have just men working together, once you introduce that some of the skills that women have and the way that they go about doing things, whether it's easier getting collaboration or letting people get our way. I think that's a very nice way to get things done. You know, maybe the guys can look across at that and go, oh, there's an interesting way of doing that. I never really saw that before. So I would say maybe there's some benefit in that regard.
Well, I'll just embellish that because obviously at Women's Enterprise Centre we're interested in diversity, and we actually have done a lot of research into it. And the Catalyst Group does a lot of research into diversity, and what they've reported is that companies with three or more women on their boards have an ROI which is over 40% higher than companies that don't have 3 or more women on their boards. So in their experience, gender diversity in decision making creates much higher profit. And we're actually in the process right now of delivering some diversity training, which I think I'm going to talk to Tracy about afterwards to see if there's people at Flightcraft that might want to participate in it, because it talks what we've determined is that diversity, and it's not just gender diversity, it's also ethnic diversity, and you know, there's a variety of different things that can be diverse about people, but that diversity really creates better outcomes on the decision-making side. It also creates better opportunities with your customers. If you have a diverse customer base, then if you reflect that with your employee base, with your suppliers, and in your decision making and your governance, you get better results and better buy-in, and that leads to better profitability. Mm-hmm. So the business case for diversity is extremely well documented and extremely compelling. It's just not something that is well known yet. So we are actually actively working with Kelowna Community Resources actually to help let companies and other educational institutions become more aware of that opportunity. Mm-hmm. So that's a great question. Thanks for asking it.
Can I add to that just a little bit? I would say where I see it affect our workplace definitely is in the culture. And Dave Crisco, one of our founders, makes a joke, and it's not a joke because it was true, but when he hired his first female employee, sat him right between his 2 developers, sat her right between them, and suddenly they showered more, they dressed up more, and it's a joke, but I look at, like Karen here, Karen's an artist on our team, and the room that Karen's in is 50-50 guys and girls working on a team together, 30 of them, and the livelihood and the mood and the energy in that room is so different than, say, our like complete engineering strike team room. You know, the humor is different, the smell is different, and I'm not lying. And not that it's bad; it's just different. But I really do think that it affects a lot of things in the culture. One of them being that. Disney as a whole is doing a whole thing around women in leadership, and everybody's kind of rallying around this right now in big business. And we had our VP come up a couple of weeks ago and do a little roundtable with us here, and finding that because it's so embedded in our culture, and it has been since the day one of Club Penguin, it's actually not really an issue in Kelowna. We go, no, we feel pretty fine about it. Yeah, there's lots of women in leadership, and we like working together. And because it's so embedded in the culture already, it becomes a non-issue. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I don't really, from a diversity standpoint, are you good at your job? Do you get along well with your team? Do you care about the product? Awesome. Then you're good here. And I think that's what's really, really the most important.
Barb, you had something to say on this?
Yeah, I work in a public institution where we practice all of those things, and it's a wonderful thing, so I can attest to that. But I can tell you the downside of it for me is because I fit many of those different diversity categories, age and those other things, you get worn out because you're on every committee. So that's the downside of it. So it does help. You have to think about it. You have to think about that diversity because the creativity and ideas come from places you just wouldn't expect. Mm-hmm. But you don't want to wear people out too. Mm-hmm. So you have to balance some of that.
Yeah. Being the token diversity person, I don't think is ever a great thing. And
that's why you need critical mass.
Yeah, yes. I've been that as part of a Walt Disney Company on like this creative for games, and I'm the only woman, and I'm totally fine with that, except when there's the odd comment of, we need more people like you, and I'm like, when you say like me, do you mean a woman? or actually someone with my skill set and what I bring to the table, you know, and feeling like maybe I'm just the token woman is never a cool thing. But it doesn't mean I don't represent, and just because it's kind of fun.
So I can't see Fiona. Oh, there you are. So do you mind telling us your name and where you're from?
Certainly. I'm Constance Crompton, and I teach digital humanities at UBC and Henry, I'd like to riff off something you had said earlier, but with a question for the whole panel, because I know I have students who are watching on the stream. That you had said, oh, you know, if it was all about past experience, maybe I wouldn't have been, you know, hired in business because I'm a programmer. And I just wanted to ask if any of you have advice for students who are, you know, in courses that may not have a one-to-one relationship with the work they're going to do. They're not studying nursing to be nurses, you know, about you know, how to start out in the world with the skills that they have to move into, you know, any range of tech-related careers.
Well, you know, I think Tracy, going back to what she said, where you put up your hand and you bully your way into something regardless of how much you know. I just don't take no for an answer, that you don't know it. Oh, well, we'll find someone, we'll figure it out. Just having that confidence and taking risks. You know, I don't agree that women are less of risk takers. We may be more calculated and careful, but full-on risk here. And I applaud any woman that does take risks and tries different things. So any student can do that. And someone that came to me, now as the CEO, and if someone came to me and said, I don't know how to program, but I've done something like that, I'm in. I would probably believe them, you know, with that kind of attitude.
I would just comment that UBCEO can do lots to create opportunities for students. I went to university in Waterloo, and I studied Fortran and used punch cards at the, but they have an amazing co-op program for all their engineering and software students, and to me that is the best way for a student to get opportunities. It's lower risk, and it gives them exposure, and that's what they need. Because you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know where you want to land until you see a few examples. And, you know, I learned by process of elimination, you know, and that was because I had lots of opportunities. Karen, you've got the mic, so I'm not sure where we are on time. Okay, so how about we let Karen ask her question, and then we'll go to the draw. All right, after that, and the conversation can continue after that.
Okay, maybe I can open this one up to all the panelists, but it's interesting to see, you know, we're talking about women in technology, but a lot of the people here on the panel tonight, they don't necessarily come from a technology background in terms of education, and, you know, Laurel, you're also an example of that. And so I was just wondering if there were any issues you found with credibility working with engineers or computer scientists and everything over the years, if you didn't come from a, you know, traditional tech background.
If I guess I could just start. I had a law degree when I started my aviation career, but I was young. I was in my 20s. And I think had I not had that education, doing what I tried to do would have been harder, for sure. So that kind of credibility is helpful. And I think so your son having an engineering degree and being young is going to be well served by that. So having some kind of education, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. I mean, mine was rather unrelated at some point. I think that helps. And I think also if you don't try and pretend that you know everything and that you're not scared to go to someone and say, you know, tell me about that. How does that work? Why this and why that? And, you know, I think it just that then takes over, as opposed to someone just sitting back and wondering, well, like, are you really trying to BS me here and you don't know what you're talking about? And like, just throw it on the floor and say, there it is. Let's deal with it.
The other quality that I would add, and completely agree, is I tell my students to find their passion, right? And if you combine it with that and those opportunities and what they're good at and what they want to work on with the goals, something good will come from that. And you can't go wrong with that. Your credibility will be built because you see it and you'll be able to explain it to them, right? Because you have that strong idea, and go for it. There's no apologizing. I think another word was used earlier.
Yeah, I would agree. I think knowing what you bring to the table, extremely important. Being confident in that, knowing what questions to ask, and for me, a slightly hard lesson to learn was knowing what language that group of people wants to use. I remember walking around our studio saying, well, that's easy, and you can do that because that's easy, and I would get everyone really up in arms because what they're doing is not easy. It may be a simpler thing to build, but it's not easy, and it was really like, oh, okay, don't use the word easy, I got it. Don't undermine my work just because the task is simple on the range of like, I can do this in 2 days versus it's going to take me 3 months. It doesn't mean it's easy. So finding out what it is that each of the, knowing your audience is also knowing your team, right? And what is it that makes them feel valued, makes them feel understood, and making sure that you are valuing them in that. That was definitely a lesson that I had to learn, is what motivates different types of people in different work conditions, and how do you make sure that you're leveraging those strengths.
Anne-Marie, do you have any comments about credibility and from your background?
Being a tech person in a tech industry, I actually, something I do say is if you are going to own a tech company, like a software company, it will really serve you well to know programming and have to deal with engineers. Because I see so many people start companies like mine, software companies, with no programming background and getting taken advantage by engineers, getting false estimates. Our industry is not good that way. So I do recommend, if you do have an interest in having something, a company like mine, to understand the technical aspect.
I agree. I was actually just in a meeting this week that I heard the funniest comment from one of our tech directors, which was, your tech team is the smartest people in the room, and they're going to try to make their job pretty easy. So
yes, that's a good way to put it.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah. My experience was slightly different because, like you say, I was a non-tech person. So I had to earn my credibility. I had to definitely earn the respect of the people around me. And I had one boss tell me at one point that he didn't think that I would be able to add as much value in as short a time as I did, but I focused on adding value. And if you do that, if you're there because you want to contribute, and you contribute, and you're confident enough to, sort of make the ask, it'll get noticed, and that was certainly the case for me. So I'd just like to, I can't see you again. Oh, there you are. She's wearing a very noticeable outfit. I'd just like to bring Fiona up to grab one of those books, which we're now going to raffle off, and then I'm going to thank the panel. So the person who's getting this copy of the book is Vanya Chan, but she already has one, so you can pick the next one, okay?
Never mind.
So is Susan McIntyre here from People in Focus?
Yay.
You have won a copy of Lean In. No. Come on up and grab. Oh, Jeff's going to deliver it. So I would just like to thank all the women on this panel on behalf of Accelerate Okanagan and on behalf of Women's Enterprise. I'd like to thank all of you and all of the panelists from the previous group for your interesting discussion, and for all of you for coming out tonight. I think that, what we've heard tonight, we've heard about the need for a different form of mentoring, for maybe getting women more involved in investing. We've heard about how it's important to get women and girls into science and technology, how important it is to link students in with industry, and there are a lot of resources that we can tap into. There's BC WIT, there's CATA WIT, there's women in technology groups out the Yazoo, there's Chick Geeks, there's Women Who Code. There's like so many groups, and so there's an abundance of resources that can be tapped into. There seems to be an abundance of interest in supporting this, women taking more leadership roles and having more careers in the tech sector, which is fantastic. So I think there's follow-up to do. And I think Accelerate Okanagan has indicated that they're committed to doing that follow-up, so there will be some of that going on. I don't know what you want to do with these evaluations. Did everybody get an evaluation? So if you could fill that in before you go, that would be excellent. And in addition, there is a copy of that article about the Consumer Electronics Show that I quoted from at the door. I don't know if people got it when they came in or if they are getting it on the way out, but if you're interested in that, that's available. And, this is the first such event in 15 years in this area. And I hope it's not another 15 years before somebody takes the initiative and does this again. So thank you all for coming out.